You are listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report, episode 125.4. Grant Shouse reacts to IU's loss to Notre Dame. Please forgive the sound quality. I was driving while doing the podcast.
You're listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report with your host, Greg Mengels.
All right, Grant, back on the Central Indiana Sports Report. Happy to have you. Unfortunately, the end of the line for the greatest season in Indiana football history.
Yeah, just this past off season when Coach Signetti was brought in, there was something about him that me as a fan, I think, I think kind of drew my attention a little bit, and it was kind of the swagger. It was kind of the way he carried himself, and the way he carried himself is, you're not supposed to like him, and I think he's made that pretty clear. He's a guy that I think's easy to hate.
I
And
I did a report with Eric Robinson from Notre Dame's perspective, and of course IU is his second team, and he said he never disliked Signetti until he played against him, and suddenly he gets why everybody dislikes him.
yeah, I mean, like I said, he's easy to hate. And if he wasn't coaching your team, you would hate him. There's no question about it. But the way he kind of carries himself, he's almost a little, I think Coach Knight-esque in a way where he, he just has a way about, going his business. And
And
he
like
brought in these,
and like
what?
and like Coach Knight, he is a tactician on the highest level.
Well, I think he's more of, I'm not even sure how much of a coach he really is. He's more, to me, it almost seems like he's like a sports psychologist. Like he's got and we talked about with Michelle the other night, Indiana has some of the best assistant coaches in the country. They have one of the best assistant coach pools in all of football. And you mesh these guys together, and then especially bringing in transfers that are your own players that have worked with, your skilled coaches, at the previous stop at James Madison, and you bring that bond with you. The only thing I think that was different between a lot of those JMU guys and what was going on at Indiana was just the fact that it was in Indiana, and they were in the Big Ten, and they were just wearing an Indiana uniform. They did I think they did the same things they did at James Madison at Indiana. But to me, in the offseason, that kind of struck me. I was like, Indiana's put together a good roster. And so when the season started, I was looking forward to it. I think a lot of people are always looking forward to, a new coach, everything. There's a little more rejuvenation in within the program. And then you have, pile on top that the guys already had some unbelievable one-liners like "Google me, I win," which is not directed at any team.
Right,
It's
it's a great
directed
line
at the
though.
media. It's that was directed at the media. And then you have, the one-liners of Purdue sucks, but so does Michigan and Ohio State.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things. When I first heard it, when he made the comment, is very first public, really one of his first public appearance. I was like, what in the hell is this guy doing? Like, what is this guy doing? And the more I listened, and the more I Googled, the more I was like, this guy may know what he's doing. And first game of the year, obviously, like I said, I was excited. Got the win against Florida International. Came back the next week, beat Western Illinois 77-3. But a lot of people, I mean, those are guaranteed. Those two are guaranteed wins. And a lot of people circled the UCLA game as Indiana's first big test. UCLA was 1-0. They had already won their first game, and they had a whole week, basically 2 weeks, to get ready and prepare for Indiana. And I remember that whole day just going about, not really expecting them to play well. This is from a fan's perspective, going off historically how Indiana's been. I didn't expect them to play well, and they did. They exceeded expectations in that game. When they beat UCLA on the road at UCLA, that's when I remember thinking, okay, this feels different. This is different, because I don't care how bad UCLA is. I really don't.
Right.
I can't think of an Indiana team recently, besides maybe in 2020, the fluke year, that that an Indiana team could go out there and win that game. There's just no
Yep.
way. And they come back and beat Charlotte. I was at the game. It was the first half was a little frustrating. It was like 17-10 at halftime. Indiana blew it open the second half. We left about mid-fourth quarter because we knew it was over. The next week, came back in the rain against Maryland.
And
Beat,
you as an IU fan, those are games that even though you think you're better, you start to think, oh, but this is IU. It's Maryland. It's not. There are no easy wins here.
yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people are thinking that at the beginning of the season. And especially, I'm like, okay, yeah, off to a good start, but the luck's going to run out, the magic's going to run out, and then
Exactly.
they're going to end up 7-5 or it is. Then when they beat Maryland and they're 5-0, now I'm like, okay, something's happening here, and nobody around the country seeing it. Then they beat Northwestern and they're 6-0. They're going to a bowl game. I don't know about you, but they could have won those first 6, beat Northwestern, and lost the next 6 and gone to a bowl game. And I'm telling you, Indiana fans would have been, I wouldn't say content, but they would have been okay with it because they're going to a bowl game. And then they beat Northwestern. They get the bye week. Then they have Nebraska. And the Nebraska game was a game I had circled from the previous December because, for me personally, I had a friend who I went to high school with, a girl from Germany who was a foreign exchange student when I was in high school. We went to school together. And we stayed in touch when she left and went back to Germany. But, she kept saying, hey, I'm going to be coming back in October of 2024. I'm like, okay, sweet. Yeah, I think we should go to a college football game. Indiana, playing Nebraska when you're going to be here. Let's go to the game. So we planned on going to the game, and me and a group of friends went down, and we had a good time. But I still remember thinking, Indiana's 6-0. And I remember thinking, today's the day the magic runs out. They're going to get beat. No way.
It's the exact
In
opposite.
my opinion, that was the best performance they put on all year, was that Nebraska game.
And that
Played
Nebraska
well,
game,
start to finish.
I think that
Huh?
Nebraska game, even though it's not one of the best Nebraska teams of all time, that Nebraska game, I think, got a lot of attention. Not just that they won, but the way they did it.
Well, and Big Noon kickoff was there, and then because Indiana was 6-0, Nebraska was 5-1. That's on paper, that's a big game.
Right.
And then Indiana did what they did to Nebraska, and it's not Indiana's fault that Nebraska lost 4 in a row after that, or 3 in a row, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
That's not Indiana's fault. That's Nebraska's own fault for playing into that. But anyways, we can talk about a little more of that down the road. But they win the game, and they're 7-0, and I think that's when the national media and all these people around the country are finally like, okay, what's really going on here? They're 7-0. They beat everybody handedly. They haven't trailed yet this year. College Game Day announces they're coming to Bloomington. People's eyes are open. The fan base is officially rejuvenated. They sold out the Nebraska game. They sold out the Washington game, which I was at. And let me tell you, with that College Game Day down there for the Washington game, Greg,
Yeah.
was really one of the most unbelievable atmospheres I've been a part of.
Yeah.
And that was just so much fun because I've been to games where there's been 12,000 people.
Right.
And now there's 53,000. I know it's a smaller stadium, but there's 53,000 people there. It's sold out. It's a sea of red. The place is rocking, absolutely rocking. And I remember getting in the stadium after being out there at game day. I'd been out there since 6:30 in the morning. And I remember getting in the stadium, and before kickoff, I looked around, and You're starting to, I don't know what it was, but I started to feel some tears come out. I was crying tears of joy just looking at this. And so they win the game. They're 8-0 without their starting quarterback in that game, Curtis Rourke, out with the thumb
Amazing.
injury. And that was huge to win that. They didn't play great, honestly. It probably played as poorly as they had against any power conference team that year, this year to that juncture in the season before probably the Ohio State game in Michigan. But they win the game. Then they do what they do to Michigan State. Now they're 9-0. And now it's like, okay, they're 9-0. You look at or really after the Washington game, they're 8-0. And now it's like, okay, we look at their schedule and yeah, they're very well could be 11-1. And so, well, what are we going to do with them? Well, they're going to be 11-1 if they can win out, and lose to Ohio State. Now we got to think about if they're, I can't believe we're saying it. I think a lot of people were like, I can't believe we're saying this, but we're got to think about if they're going to make the college football playoff. And so they, everyone, I don't really know why I'm going through it all because everybody knows what happened, but they do what they do to Michigan State, which was a great win, maybe the best they played all year after being down 10-0, trailed for the first time that year. They beat Michigan in a close one. That one was a heart stopper. I was like, there's no way we're winning this. Then Ohio State happens, which was, that was disappointing. But I think in the bottom of everybody's stomach and in the back of everybody's mind, they kind of think everybody had that feeling they could be, they were going to lose to Ohio State. Then, of course, the Purdue game. Now it's time for the playoff. And to me, when the bracket came out, that was one of, in my opinions, I thought at the time, the best draw Indiana could have gotten. Playing Notre Dame. Indiana had been stellar. I'm talking prior to the game. They'd been stellar against the run all year. They had one of the best run defenses in the country. Their offense was really good. Notre Dame had a good defense. That's poised for a good matchup. And I think on paper, everybody thought it was going to be a good game. And then, you come out first drive, punt it. They throw an interception. You get the ball back, drive down the field, and throw the interception in the red zone, and then give up a 98-yard touchdown that sets the tone for what's going to happen the rest of the game. And Indiana made it look respectable. They only lost by 10, 27-17, but it's disappointing. But in my opinion, I don't think Indiana's done. I think the sky's the limit for them in a way.
Well, that's my next question is, after watching that, that you're not quite you don't quite belong in the elite yet. Do you believe Cignetti can get them to be an elite program?
I would say they don't belong in the elite yet. I mean, I can see why people are going to say that. Now SMU's getting they're getting the whooping on Penn State right now, and now everybody's like, oh, why did Indiana and SMU make it over Alabama and Ole Miss?
Yep.
Because Alabama lost on the road to Vanderbilt after being favored. They lose on the road against Oklahoma after being favored on the road, when Oklahoma was 6-6. Ole Miss loses on the road to Kentucky, a game they should not have lost on the road. And then earlier in the year, they lose to Kentucky, which was Kentucky's only Power 4 win of the year. So, no, they did not deserve to be in over Indiana.
No, they did not.
Not at all. I understand why you want to say Indiana did not deserve to be in. I get it. They did not play well. But you look at historically the other playoff games that have happened over the years. We've had so many blowouts. Cincinnati was blown out in their playoff game. They made it. They were the darling of college football that year. They made the playoff. Look at the national championship just 2 years ago. Georgia beat TCU 65-3.
Yep.
I mean, you're telling me TCU deserved to be in? If that's the case, if that's what you're really telling me. Indiana only lost by 10. They had one misfortune happen against them on defense. Yeah, their offense couldn't move the ball. They struggled. I'll admit it. They did. Their defense gave up one bad play, if you really think about it. They had a couple penalties. It was nothing Notre Dame did. Indiana shot themselves in the foot. They gave themselves the self-inflicted wounds. That's what killed Indiana. Indiana belonged or deserved to be in. SMU deserved to be in. After joining the ACC, they can show they can play with the big dogs in the ACC, the Louisvilles and the in this. I don't
Yep.
want to say that. This is face the ACC is not that good, but
No, but
you know
Clemson and it's
you're 11-1. If you win 11 games, you only lose one, and one of the games you lose is to a team that's in the playoff. I'm talking Indiana.
that's
You
right.
lose to a team that's also in the playoff and is going to play.
Yep.
Then you 100% not 100 1,000,000% deserve to be in that 12-team playoff spot.
No doubt they deserve to be in. Last thing I want to say is, Michelle and I had a debate last night. All the bravado that Signetti showed throughout the year, they get a 4th and 4 and kick the field goal when their offense is obviously struggling against Notre Dame. I thought that was a huge mistake.
You see, for me, I had pretty much checked out at that point. I had the game on, but I wasn't. They could have went for it. I'm not sure it mattered. And
They're
like
making a
he said
touchdown
after,
there. It might change the way the game goes. That's how football works sometimes.
that is true. And I think, you know, I mean, I obviously want to play devil's advocate to him for him, but I do think you should have gone for it on 4th and 4
Here's
instead
my
of kicking the
philosophy.
field goal.
If you don't have a play that can get 4 yards, you might as well just pack it in.
Yeah, and that's just one of those things that it's obviously, I think, one of those things you think about how the game ended up, where, because at that time it was only 14-0 at that time
Right.
it's only 14-0. So, it could have changed things, but I kind of get his thought process. The offense was struggling moving the ball, but I see both sides of it. If it were up to me, the things you've done all year, I would have went for it on fourth and
Exactly.
four. I would
That's
have
the
went for it
point
on
I'm
fourth and
making.
four.
He's
Yeah.
saying we're the best, we're the best, we're the best, and we're going to surrender here. That didn't sound.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
not
you're almost
surrender
kind
the
of
game, but
waving the white flag. You know what I mean?
yeah, exactly. To me, it seemed like a white flag. We just want to get
But
points and be happy with some points.
right, and you know, I hate to say it, I really do, because Signetti and them they've done a great job all year long. I
Yes.
mean, they have.
Yep.
But in my opinion, I think they were out muscled with talent on the field, and in a way, and this didn't affect, I think, the whole game, but in a way, I think they maybe got a little out coached.
Yeah, I think they did.
Marcus Freeman is an amazing coach.
He is a
An
very good
amazing
coach.
coach. And,
Yes,
and
he is.
Notre Dame, with the things they did on defense to stop Indiana's offense, arguably one of the best in the country,
Yeah.
was phenomenal. And Notre Dame 100% deserved to be in the playoff after losing to Northern Illinois. I don't know how they lost that game, Greg.
No kidding.
I watched that last night, and I'm like, to this day, I don't know how they lost that.
Yeah.
This is a Notre Dame team. This is a Notre Dame program. I think at some point is going to want to join a conference at some time.
You're going to have
And I agree. And that's the thing is, I don't hate Notre Dame. I really don't. You can't take anything away from them. It's not one of those things. It wasn't the ref's fault. It's not like they got screwed on a bad call. Now, the late hit out of bounds was a terrible call. That was awful. It was nothing Notre Dame did. It was really nothing the officials did to affect the game. Indiana, like I said, gave themselves self-inflicted wounds, and they just couldn't recover. But here's where Indiana can kind of like almost have like a moral victory in the playoff. Is if Ohio State wins tonight, Notre Dame wins next week against Georgia, they both go on a run and they both meet in the national championship game. Because now Indiana can say, well, we had 2 losses that year, and both of them, it doesn't matter what happens in that game. Both of them were to the national champion and the national runner-up.
That's right. And don't you feel like this tournament right now is just really wide open after this weekend?
No question about it. And I'm not so sure you can pinpoint a national champion. I mean,
No.
or Oregon probably is the favorite. They're undefeated. They're the 1 seed. But I'm telling you, do not count out Georgia. Don't count out Notre Dame. Do not count out Notre Dame.
And my
Don't
pick,
count
by the
out Penn
way,
State.
is Penn State, and they looked really good today. So yeah,
They have, and you know, beating up on SMU. And again, I've only seen one play of the game. I flipped it on my phone during the Butler game, and like no joke, the play I flipped on was the first pick six of the game. That was the only play I've seen. But from what I've seen, and I've seen the score, um, you know, SMU deserved to be there.
yes, they
I'll
did.
say it again. They deserve to be there. Indiana deserved to be there. Arizona State deserves to be there with the automatic bid.
Yep.
But Arizona State, seeing what's happened to Indiana and now SMU, I think is maybe a little more driving factor on that they need to play pretty well in their game against. I can't remember. I think they're playing the winner of is it Texas and Clemson? They're playing the winner of.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. So I think Arizona State, I think the pressure then goes on them because they're kind of that third, I don't want to say Cinderella team, but they're that third kind of non-blue blood team
Yeah.
that,
Oh,
isn't supposed to be in the playoff.
You could put Boise State in that too, probably not
Well,
as much, but yeah.
I guess I forgot about them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks to Grant Shouse for being a friend of the Central Indiana Sports Report and always being willing to give up his time for our listeners. Speaking of which, thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, or follow on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Amazon Music, or YouTube, so you don't miss a single segment. Tell a friend. The Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media. And also, I love Susie.